All the latest now with the ITV News.
Matt Hancock resigns. The Health Secretary finally succumbed to pressure this evening after being caught breaking social distancing rules by kissing one of his aides.
I've been to see the Prime Minister to resign as Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Those of us who make these rules have got to stick by them, and that's why I've got to resign.
So the UK's top health official is forced out during a pandemic. We'll see who's stepping into his shoes. Also, more than 150 are still missing after 3 days of searching. Hope dims at the site of the Miami apartment collapse. Denmark.
This is ITV News with Sameena Ali Khan.
Good evening. Matt Hancock finally bowed to the pressure on him tonight and resigned as Health Secretary, the day after images emerged of him kissing an aide in his office in a breach of coronavirus restrictions. He wrote to the Prime Minister saying, "The last thing I would want is for my private life to distract attention from the single-minded focus that is leading us out of this crisis." And he apologised for breaking the rules he had expected others to follow. Well, this evening, Downing Street announced the former Chancellor Sajid Javid will take over as Health Secretary. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Matt Hancock quit his job as Secretary of State for Health tonight after it became clear that public anger about his rule-breaking affair with Gina Coladangelo, seen here in the red dress, was not abating.
I've been to see the Prime Minister to resign as Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. I understand the enormous sacrifices that everybody in this country has made, that you have made, and those of us who make these rules have got to stick by them, and that's why I've got to resign.
Mr Hancock's affair with his colleague, exposed by the Sun newspaper yesterday, broke the social distancing rules he was responsible for. And although the Prime Minister said he regarded the matter as closed, Tory MPs had been amongst those calling for Mr Hancock to go.
I think his position had become untenable, and it's okay for him to have the confidence of number 10, but ultimately the Health Secretary, any Secretary of State, but particularly the Health Secretary during a pandemic, he must have the confidence of the public. And what became very clear over the last 24 hours is that he'd lost that confidence.
This evening, Gina Coladangelo, who had often been seen at Mr Hancock's side, also quit her role at the Department for Health. The opposition say it shouldn't have taken as long as it did for Mr Hancock to go.
Boris Johnson should have shown the guts, the spine, the awareness to have sacked him yesterday. And I think the fact that Boris Johnson failed to do that speaks volumes about Johnson's failure of leadership and his lack of judgment.
Mr Hancock already stood accused of mishandling some aspects of the pandemic response, but this time he had broken the regulations which carried his name.
Hands, face, space. Hands, face, space. Hands, face, space.
Jo Goodman lost her dad to COVID. Only 10 people were allowed at the funeral.
I think it's only right that the Health Secretary has resigned. I think for those of us who've made sacrifices in the most difficult circumstances, knowing that our leaders haven't lived up to the same standards that we have had to abide by in the hardest times of our lives is really, really difficult.
And so Sajid Javid returns to the top table 16 months after his resignation from the Treasury. And he returns to one of the most challenging jobs in government. Carl Dinnan, ITV News.
Our political editor, Robert Peston, is here. And, Robert, does this draw a line under Boris Johnson's troubles with the Health Secretary?
I doubt it. I mean, just to be clear, the most surprising thing about his departure is that it happened today rather than yesterday, when we first learned that he'd broken his own social distancing rules. While we were being told we couldn't even meet family and friends, he was snogging a colleague. But the questions about other aspects of his conduct in recent months remain, and the Labour Party will press for investigations into how Gina Colangelo was appointed as a non-executive director. She's the woman he was conducting an affair with. How contracts were awarded to associates, to his associates. There's, of course, coming up the long-awaited investigation into a whole raft of decisions that many think were mistaken during the pandemic, taken by the Prime Minister and indeed by Matt Hancock. The Prime Minister said, in accepting Matt Hancock's resignation, that he was sorry he was going and that he thought he would be able to return to public service. That's a hint that he wants him back in government. I have to say, I don't see how he gets back into government until these investigations are completed, and they will take months, and in the case of the big investigation, years.
Robert, thank you very much. Fires are burning in the rubble of a collapsed 12-storey apartment block in Florida. It's slowing efforts to rescue more than 150 people still listed as missing in the disaster. Meanwhile, it's emerged an engineer found evidence of major structural damage in the building 3 years ago. Our US correspondent Emma Murphy reports from Miami.
They are dousing what's left of Champlain Tower with thousands of gallons of water. Deep beneath, a number of fires are burning, slowing efforts to find those trapped in the wreckage of their homes. The smoke emerges through gaps in the rubble, a vast area which seems to dwarf the huge diggers dragging back the debris.
The rain cloud's been swarming in pretty frequently. Everything's kind of wet.
Rescue and recovery teams are now arriving in Miami from across the United States. The conditions so grueling, each team works in half-hour rotations.
It's a lot more devastating in person than it is through pictures.
Do you have any hope that there might be an opportunity to get survivors out yet?
Oh, we always have hope. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. You know, if we save one life, then that makes it all worthwhile.
No one has been found dead or alive in the last 24 hours, though 159 people are believed to be lost beneath the debris pile. All search and rescue operations have their challenges. That's what the teams are trained for. The particular problem here is the fire. It's making it really difficult for them to go and work on the debris pile, but without working on it, they can't put that fire out. It's now emerged that in 2018, a structural report warned significant repair work was needed. And in recent weeks, residents had complained about vibrations from building work. For those who grieve the missing, there are many questions and frustration at how long the operation is taking.
It's just very tragic. I don't understand how something like this could happen. There just seems like the work is going so slow. These poor people that have been sitting there for days.
That work is slow and challenging, and its pace is adding to the agony for those desperate to know for sure what has become of those they love. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Miami.
And staying in America, police in Colorado have admitted one of their officers shot and killed a hero who had just stopped a murderer. Johnny Hurley witnessed a gunman shoot and kill a police officer, so drew his own concealed weapon and shot the gunman dead. But an officer arriving later appears to have mistaken Hurley for the gunman and shot and killed him. The police chief called Hurley a hero.
The threat to our officers and our community was stopped by a hero named Johnny Hurley. Johnny's actions can only be described as decisive, courageous, and effective in stopping further loss of life.
Well, now to Amsterdam and the chance for Wales to advance to the last 8 of the Euros. Sadly, it was not to be. Wales are out of the tournament after a 4-0 thrashing by Denmark. Lucy Watson reports on the day the Danes dashed Wales's quarter-final dreams.
Defeat is a difficult pill to swallow when the pride of a nation means so much. But passion alone was not enough tonight. There was consolation in the stands and on the pitch as Wales once again bow out of Europe.
Absolutely gutted. I thought Wales had a good chance of going through. It's a heartbreak, isn't it?
I was a bit sad. My son's particularly sad.
I was just really hoping that they'd at least score one goal.
It was a game where the supporters were outnumbered and the players outclassed. Inside the arena, Wales battled to have their voices heard. Heavily outnumbered by the Danish supporters, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in raw passion. Grown men reduced to tears. If Wales were to make their mark, they needed their talisman to fire on all cylinders. And Gareth Bale was inches away from giving his men the lead.
First sighter for Wales's captain.
But Denmark, on a wave of emotion themselves after the collapse of Christian Eriksen earlier in the tournament, went ahead with a wonderful goal from Kasper Dolberg.
And a fabulous goal!
1-0 to the Danes. The Prime Minister approved. There was still time to recover, but Wales made a disastrous start to the second half, gifting a second goal to Dolberg. The Wales fans sensed it might not be their day. Denmark then made sure there would be no fight back with a third goal to wrap up the match.
That will do it for Denmark. Joachim Mæhle.
But it got worse still. A frustrated tackle from Harry Wilson was too much for the referee, and he was sent off. And to top off Wales's bad day, the Danes finished them off with a fourth goal. Denmark through to the quarter-finals.
Denmark's feel-good story of this tournament continues, but the European adventure for Wales is well and truly over. Danish efficiency proving too much for Welsh spirits.
The Danes are en route to dreamland territory as the Welsh head home.
Don't worry about the Danish, the Welsh, they're always strong and they buy!
Lucy Watson, ITV News, Amsterdam.
There were not one, but two big crashes on the opening stage of the Tour de France today.
Jumbo-Visma riders have gone down en masse there. Half the peloton's down. That was a huge crash.
This first one was caused by a fan on the course. British four-time winner Chris Froome was involved in the second later in the stage. And Andy Murray says he's confident of playing well in his first singles match at Wimbledon in 4 years. The two-time champion says he's been practicing well and is looking forward to being back on centre court on Monday.
I'm delighted that I can be back competing here again. I'm most excited about being in front of a big crowd and the fans and everything. That's really something that I've missed.
And good luck to him. And that is it. The weather forecast is next, but from all of us here on the Weekend News team, good night.